Parish Council meeting to order. The date is September 27, 2017. The time is 6:01. If we can stand for the prayer and pledge, Mr. Trahan.
Let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, as we come to you today, we ask for your guidance to do the business of this parish, that we may do it in an honest and fair way, dear Lord. Dear Lord, guide and protect all of us as we travel through the week, dear Lord. Dear Lord, we pray for our veterans and our people overseas, dear Lord, and for President Trump, dear Lord, and the world crisis, dear Lord. Forgive us for we have sinned. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen. Amen.
Mr. Francis, will you lead us in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Tommy Pollard.
Here.
Michael Landry.
Here.
Tommy Landry. Lloyd Brown.
Here.
Warren Goshesang.
Here.
Natalie Broussard.
Here.
Paul Landry.
Here.
Ricky Gonsalam.
Here.
Joe Dugas.
Here.
Eugene Olivier.
Here.
Brian Napier.
Here.
Berwick Francis.
Here.
Marty Trahan.
Here.
Chad Macharan.
Contacted by Mr. Landry that he was not going to be able to attend tonight's meeting. I think that's the only one else, right? Need a motion to go into public comments. I have a motion by Mr. Gonsalas, a second by Mr. Goshesang. Roll call. Carries. We're now in public session. There were no requests for comments from the general public on non-agenda items, and we have not gotten any comments from the request for comments on agenda items. Is there anybody who hadn't filled out a card but wanted to comment on an agenda item? Hearing none, I need a motion to close public comments. I need a motion to close public comments. Oh. I have a motion by Mr. Trahan, a second by Mr. Brown. Roll call. Y'all can press again, please. That motion carries. Next, we'll go to reports, finance, and administrative action. There were none. Parish or other governmental agencies, none. Public Works reports. Public Works Department report for closed work orders dated September 4th through the 8th and the 11th through the 15th of 2017 were either emailed to you or contained in your packet. Public Works Department report for open work orders dated September 19th, 2017 were emailed or in the packet. No special business. Any council member announcements? Mr. Pollard?
Yes, I'd just like to recognize Ms. Kristen Pelican. She's in the audience. She's a junior at UL, majoring in psychology. She is writing a report for one of her science grades. Can you stand up, Ms.
Love the new haircut. Welcome. Good to see you. Mr. Gonsalas?
Yeah, I just want to thank the community and Iberia Parish, as well as the administration and council, for a great festival weekend this weekend. We had a great turnout. A lot of volunteers did a lot of hard work and put on a great event for the community, and it was very successful. So I just want to shout out to Iberia Parish for supporting a great event.
Mr. Goshesang?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Broussard. I'd like to announce of the barbecue beef pull board fundraiser for the Ronella Fire Department. It will be Sunday, November 12th, from 11 to 1. So come out and help our volunteers who keep us safe.
Along the same lines as Mr. Gonsalin's comments, I echo what he said about the great festival. I think I participated in something each day of the festival, and it was a huge success. There were no incidences that I've heard of as far as problems with security, so shout out to the Sheriff's Department for that. The city of New Iberia did a great job. It was all cleaned up, and it couldn't even tell we had a festival by Monday morning. And cooperation from everybody in the festival board, they did a great job. There was one major complaint that I know Mr. Gonsalves and I both received a lot of, and I just wanted to address it with the public, and that was the courthouse parking lot being blocked off. I have spoken with Mr. Reshord. It was not done by parish administration, so I'd like the public to recognize that was not done by parish administration. It was done by the Sheriff's Department, and Mr. Reshord has guaranteed us that he's going to get with the sheriff and find a solution for the needs of the sheriff as well as the needs of the taxpayers. But we do recognize that that's the taxpayers' parking lot. We do recognize the sheriff needs some space too, but we have to work something out, and Mr. Reshord will be getting with Sheriff Aqua and working that out, and hopefully that'll be resolved before the gumbo cook-off to where it's not done again. All right, with that being said, Mr. Reshord, Parish President announcements?
I'm going to make it short because Kim is going to talk a little bit to you guys about the budget that we're going to start next week. I guess you can see that we're doing work on the second floor, the common area. That's a big deal for me because it's something that I think the parish has been needing in this courthouse for quite some time. Also today, the building, the outside of the building, we started to work on it to pressure wash the building and paint the building and change the glasses, the windows and the seals, whatever need to be done to this building and make it look like the building it should look like. So I'm not going to take a whole lot of your time, but we are in budget right now, and Kim have some things that she would like to talk to you guys about. And at the next meeting, I'll probably say a little bit more on parish president reports. Kim?
I just handed out a little packet to y'all.
Put the mic on Kim.
So just to kind of go through some of the assumptions that we've utilized in preparing fiscal 18's budgets, we've experienced some difficulties in our revenues, ad valorem and sales taxes. Ad valorem revenues, I use 95% of what was on last year's roll to do the calculations pending the final assessment numbers. I did take into consideration the levy amounts that were approved by the council earlier this year. There were a couple that were increased, so that has been addressed in the budgets. Sales tax wise, we've experienced a varying decline because all of the tax bases over which those taxes are collected vary. We have a parish-wide, we have one that's a rural only, we have one that is parish minus the city limits, so they all over different collections, so that percentage each month varies. So last year we had just across the board budgeted a 10% decline, and so we're seeing now that some of them are at 15, some of them are at maybe 8. So I tried to use what was the actual reduction for right now, and I basically split it in half. So if we were at 20, I used the 10% reduction, hoping that the fluctuations have sort of worked themselves out. The grant revenues that are budgeted have been awarded, and knowing that we may have to make some adjustments, like if I've anticipated that we're going to use more grant revenue in 17, we may need a carryover adjustment to 18's budget. So that may be coming. Relative to salaries and benefits, we did budget the 2.5% merit increases in all of the budgets for the employees. We did a small adjustment on group insurance costs. In prior years, we did a larger adjustment. We didn't have increases in those years, so we did a smaller one this year. Hopefully, that comes to fruition and it's not more than what we have. The retirement expenditures have been budgeted based on what our rates are expected to be. So that's included there. Relative to just the general operating expenditures, to the extent that we could, slim back on those expenses, we have. All of the debt service has been budgeted for in the fiscal 18 budget. And knowing that we're still in some of the reviews, likely, like the numbers that are presented in the packet here, some of those are probably going to change because we haven't finished all of our reviews with all of the departments. So it's a work in progress, and we're going to start our meetings on Monday with the Finance Committee. So just to kind of go through the packet, the first page of the packet is the consolidated proposed budget. So I'll just go through the totals, and then we'll get into more detail as we have those Finance Committee meetings. So total revenue budgeted, 46 million. Total expenditures budgeted, 67 million. So the excess of expenditures over revenues is approximately 20 million. Beginning fund balance is 60 million. Ending fund balance right at about 39 million. Relative to the excess of expenditures over revenues, you can see the last line of the expenditure category. We have $21 million budgeted for capital outlay. So that's the majority of the excess, knowing that capital outlay is typically a one-time expenditure. You know, it's not like we budgeting, you know, tapping into, you know, operating. So as we go through the individual fund budgets on the Monday night, you know, we'll get into the details of what's actually involved in all of those budgets. The third page of the packet is the presentation of how we'll present those budgets, and that may need to be changed just kind of depending on, you know, so it's a work in progress as well. And then the last page is just a summary of all of the debt service expenditures that will be made for fiscal 18.
So,
Did you have
thank you.
anything?
That's it. That's the President's report. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Did I email you this? No, I can email it. Yeah, I can. I didn't, but I'll send it.
Yeah, she can email it to
Mr.
you.
Gura, Mr. Goshistan has requested the floor.
Not basically a budgetary question, but basically a procedure question. When we going into the budget this year, I'd like to know the ground rules before we get into there. Are we doing individually budgets that night that we'll be able to amend, or are we doing the same thing we did years previous where we just came up the night of the consolidated budget adoption?
I believe it's the same way that it has been in the past. Like, you know, it's presented through the committee process, and if there's changes that need to be made, it's at the night of the public
You make the
hearing.
changes.
But we can still make the recommendations to the administration to go back and make those changes, right?
You don't have to do what you want. I don't have, I mean, do it the way you want to do it.
I'm just asking, I mean,
Any way is fine with me.
You can make recommendations, but the charter says that those actual budget amendments would have to be adopted at the public hearing on
Right.
on the 29th of
Whenever it is.
November.
okay, specifically to amend, okay.
Right.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next, we'll move to consent agenda items for public hearing and adoption. Is there any items under the consent agenda that any member of the council wishes to remove? Hearing none, we will I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of August 9th, 2017. The resolution authorizing the parish president to execute the cooperative endeavor agreement with the Louisiana Veterans Affairs, with the city of New Iberia, and with the city of Jeanerette, as well as the non-emergency medical aid and assistance between the government and city of New Iberia. I have a motion by Mr. Gonsalves, a second by Mr. Brown. Any discussion? Mr. Gonsalves?
Nope, I waved my,
Mr. Brown? Mr. Napier? No. Mr. Trahan? No. If you can please vote. Motion carries.
Why Paul wants to abstain? Because he's not here? Oh, I said absent. I'm sorry.
Next, we'll go to ordinances introduced for public hearing and adoption. Summary number 4848, introduced by the Zoning Commission, an ordinance authorizing the reclassification of the property of Milton Lewis located at 3818 Highway 14 from mixed residential R2 to general business C2, District 5. All is approved by Iberia Parish Regional Zoning Commission. I have a motion by Mr. Goshasan, a second by Mr. Trahan. Mr. Goshasan, you have the floor.
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair. This is in my district, and I'm asking that my colleagues approve the final adoption tonight. There's been no objection and has passed out of the Zoning Commission unanimously.
Mr. Trahan?
I'm in support of it.
Roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Motion carries. Move to resolutions introduced for public hearing and adoption. Summary number 178, introduced by Paul G. Landry, District 7. A resolution amending resolutions number 2017-111 and 2017-84, which amended the Acadiana Fairgrounds Commission fund budget for interim adjustments to their budget and reappropriated funding from the Public Building Maintenance Fund budget to adjust the percentage of funding for the full-time maintenance personnel from 35% funding, which was $23,936, to 90% funding, which was $37,614, and to reaffirm that said expenditure shall not be funded with any funds received from the Visitor Enterprise Fund, and also amended the affected budgets in order to allow said funding to be utilized for full-time or part-time maintenance personnel. I have a motion by Mr. Paul Landry. Do I have a second? I have a second by Mr. Olivier. Mr. Landry, you have the floor.
Guys, if y'all remember when we had passed the resolution to do the 90% funding at the Acadiana Fairgrounds, we just didn't put in there that if the person was part-time, so it only had to be a full-time. So if they get a part-time person, we can still pay 90% of it for public buildings. So it's just like a little housekeeping, that if it comes to that.
Having no other requests for comments, roll call. That motion carries. Summary number 179, introduced by Natalie Broussard, District 6, a resolution amending a 2017 fund budget in an amount of $20,000 to provide emergency funding for the Iberia Parish Community Emergency Response Team, CERT, when the parish is declared to be in a state of emergency or otherwise has to open a shelter, all to be funded from the blank line item. I have a motion by Mr. Trahan, a second by Mr. Landry. Mr. Richard, I'm going to give you the floor first.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this needs to be changed to $15,153 if possible. We'll leave the, because I think we have 515,000. So instead of just breaking it, keep 500,000 in that account and just make this 15,153.
Coming from what fund?
It's going to be coming from which line item we're going to put it on? It's going to be coming from the general fund.
It's going to come out of the general fund, the reserve for emergencies.
And the line item is going to be supplies, executive.
So from the general fund reserved for emergency line item. Is that okay with the motion and the second?
Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion, Mr. Trahan?
No, ma'am. We had, excuse me. We had talked about this when the hurricane was coming, with Harvey, and a couple of us were in the meeting, and this is what we came up with.
Yeah,
And
actually,
also the back building, to give them
Exactly.
space.
yeah.
No comment.
Mr. Gosselin?
I'll waive. I'm good.
All right. Roll call. That motion carries. Summary number 180, introduced by Paul G. Landry, District 7, a resolution amending the 2017 Acadiana Fairgrounds 2017 general $1,749,328.75, and 2017 royalty, $52,753. Fund budgets in the total amount of $1,802,081.75 in order to remove the receivables from the books and forgive previous loans made to the Acadiana Fairgrounds Commission. I have a motion by Mr. Trahan, a second by Mr. Landry. Mr. Trahan, you have the floor.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to offer a substitute to table this due to all parties not talking with each other to see how this can be worked out. And I'd like to move it to the first meeting in December to where all parties can get together.
Okay. It's my understanding that legal has drafted an amended resolution for us to consider, and I believe everybody is in agreement that we need more time to consider the amended resolution that we just received, and that's what you're referring
Yes,
to,
ma'am.
Mr. Trahan?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that good with the second? So I have a motion to table till the first meeting in December with a second. Any further discussion, Mr. Landry?
No, I'm good with that.
Mr. Dugas?
Madam Chairman. So if the agenda item tonight is to vote on whether we're going to forgive this loan or not forgive this loan. If we table it, is that motion going to change? Or are we going to, so why don't we just vote on this tonight, and we can vote on the different budget movement of the money at a later time? So I'm not sure I understand why we're tabling it.
Legal has come up with, which you were handed tonight, and to look at that and see what's on the table.
Madam Chairman, can I address legal?
Yes.
Mr. Sheila, is the object of forgiving this loan, is that going to change any with what you're proposing?
Yeah. The real intent was to make accounting entries, not to forgive. And unfortunately, the initial draft had forgive in there. The substitute resolution that each of you have before your desk says that basically it is an accounting adjustment to remove that item from the general fund and from the royalty fund, the effect of which really overstates what's really there. The draft also goes on to say that there's a specific paragraph that says, notwithstanding anything to the contrary, you're not forgiving anything. You simply recognize that it will be in the future before you're able to recover any money that would actually go back into the general fund to replenish it.
So the proposed amendment reiterates the fact that we're not intending to forgive any loan.
Yes.
The agenda item tonight is only whether we're going to forgive the loan or not. So I don't know why we couldn't vote on that tonight and do the budget adjustments later.
What I think everybody envisions is at your meeting in December to consider the substitute resolution that removes basically the word forgiveness throughout the original resolution that was granted, substitutes the words accounting adjustments, and then it includes a specific paragraph that it's clear that you're not forgiving a loan. You're simply, from an accounting perspective, removing that out of the general fund and the royalty fund so that your financial statements are not misstated, that you intend to, at the appropriate time in the future, try to recover those funds for the general fund.
Gotcha. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
So we have a motion to table to the first meeting in December with a second roll call. It doesn't show you. We have two pending. Please check your box. All right, that motion carries. Summary number 181, introduced by Iberia Medical Center Board, a resolution accepting and approving the district's budget for fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2017 through September 30th, 2018. All is recommended by the Iberia Parish Hospital Service District Number 1 Board of Commissioners. I have a motion by Mr. Gonsalas, a second by Mr. Goshasan. Mr. Gonsalas, you have the floor.
They came to the committee, we have a very solid budget and running a very proactive hospital, and very proud to say we have a good hospital in Iberia Parish, so I'm in support of the budget after going through it.
Mr. Goshasan?
I'll waive.
Roll call. That motion carries. Summary number 183, introduced by Recreation and Playground District, a resolution amending the 2017 Recreation and Playground District Fund budget in the amount of $12,100. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Summary number 182, introduced by the Airport Authority, a resolution amending the 2017 Airport Authority Fund budget in the amount of $15,948 to provide funding for the purchase of a John Deere HX-15 Flu Wing Cutter, all to be funded from the fund balance previous year's line item. Do I have a motion? I have a motion by Mr. Gonsalas, a second by Mr. Trahan. Mr. Gonsalas, you have the floor.
I waive.
Roll call. It automatically goes to the results once all votes are cast. So if you don't see the votes, look at your box. Motion carries. Summary number 183, introduced by the Recreation and Playground District, a resolution amending the 2017 Recreation and Playground District Fund budget in the amount of $12,125 to provide additional funding for repairs to the King Joseph Gym floor, all to be funded from the fund balance previous year's line item. I have a motion by Mr. Napier, a second by Mr. Francis. Mr. Napier?
I'll waive.
Mr. Francis? Roll call. Still have one. Motion carries. Make sure your light's showing up. She has to press begin voting, and sometimes we press to vote before she starts recording the voting. That's why it feels like it's not showing up. We'll get it. It's moving a lot smoother with the new equipment. We'll get it. Summary number 184, introduced by Paul G. Landry, District 7, a resolution amending the 2017 Airport Authority Fund budget in the amount of $22,000 in order to receive administrative professional services from the Iberia Industrial Development Foundation's personnel who will serve as the interim airport director, all to be funded from various line items of the administrative budget as detailed. I have a motion by Mr. Landry, by Mr. Paul Landry, a second by Mr. Napier. Mr. Paul Landry, you have the floor.
Guys, if you remember, this is just creating a line item so that we could pay the interim director running the airport. So that's all it is, housekeeping.
Mr. Napier,
I echo what he said.
roll call. That motion carries. Summary number 185, introduced by Mr. Eugene Olivier Sr., District 10, a resolution requesting the Department of Transportation and Development to review and install any necessary signage to alert motorists of high water along Highway 85 near the first mile marker and Highway 87 near Bayside Bridge. I have a motion by Mr. Napier, a second by Mr. Olivier. Mr. Napier?
Mr. Olivia had brought this up,
and I know 85 is in his district, 87 is in mine, and we both, in heavy rain events, this is a very dangerous situation. Not to say that a sign's gonna stop anything, but it will alert, if we can get this to happen, it will alert motorists, especially motorists that might not be familiar in these areas, that high water, and it's coming over the cane fields in your area and mine, over the road at times. So I support this wholeheartedly.
Mr. Olivier?
Yeah, what we're hoping to do is, because of the amount of water crossing the road, causing a driving hazard for most motorists, particularly on 85, in similar condition, like Brian said, in his district. We're hoping the state at least will come put out the barricades during high flood events to prevent motorists from actually losing control and possibly injuring themselves. Thank you.
Mr. Gosselin?
Andy, as the parish, can we put barricades on a state highway in a high water event? I didn't think so. Okay, so you'd have to call DOTD.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
why the request is to DOTD
Right,
to
okay.
do it from
This one-
which puts them something in a box.
Yeah.
Because they have fair water.
Roll call? See how y'all got that? Summary number 186, motion carries. Summary number 186, introduced by Ricky J. Gosselin, District 8, a resolution requesting the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to evaluate the outlet of Channel M26 T-by-U into Lake Dotree for a possible dredging project to increase the drainage capacity of the north side of Iberia Parish, and further that said resolution be sent to Louisiana's congressional delegation to assist in locating a funding source from the federal government. I have a motion by Mr. Gosselin, a second by Mr. Napier. Mr. Gosselin, you have the floor.
Yes, Councilor, several of us met this week with the Corps, and I thought we had a very progressive meeting, as well as Mr. Richard and administration. I thought we learned a lot, and I won't go into details, but I think we're on the right track to make progress, although it's probably long-term, but we talked about some short-term solutions in a way, and I think the projects that we entailed with this one, as well as the one that's going to be on committee agenda, ultimately can be solved down the road if we take the right protocol towards solving those goals. But I urge you to support this resolution, and I know Mr. Dugal is going to have a substitute motion on some on this one, so I support that as well.
Mr. Napier?
I also sat in the meeting, and I want to thank Ricky for calling it, and Mr. Richard was surely there with a few more of us. Very informative to know that there's things out there with the Corps that help us in the funding, especially funding for these projects. And like he said, it's not something that's going to happen next week or next year, but it's a time to get on the list. And like I said, if we're not on the list, we definitely won't be considered. So I'll echo what Ricky says, and let's support this. Thank you.
Mr. Dugas?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I actually just want to offer an amendment to this resolution. This resolution talks about evaluating the outlet of Channel M6 T-by-U into Lake Dotree. That needs to be Lake Foss Point. And it also states that it's to increase the capacity of drainage on the north side. That should be the east side. We have 2 T-by-Us in the parish, and this summary refers to M-26, which is the T-by-U that's closer to New Iberia. The one is the parish line, so they have 2 different descriptions. So if I need to clarify that anymore, let me know, but we just basically want to describe the right channel in this case.
All right, so I have a motion to amend summary number 186. Mr. Gosselin, are you seconding that amendment? So I have a motion to amend with a second. Any comments on that motion? Roll call? That motion carries. Summary number 187, introduced by the clerk of the council, a resolution accepting the property valuations for real and personal property for 2017 as established by the Iberia Parish Assessor. I need a motion. I have a motion by Mr. Gosselin, a second by Mr. Francis. Mr. Gosselin, any comments?
I waive.
Mr. Francis, any comments? Roll call. This is the full council. All right, the motion carries. Nope. We have expansion. Discuss and consider a motion to expand the agenda to discuss and consider resolution summary number 188, which is a resolution that orders and calls a public hearing to be held on November 29, 2017 for public comments for the proposed consolidated budget statement for 2018 from the parish president. The purpose of this expansion is to order and call a public hearing to be held on November 29, 2017 for public comments for the proposed consolidated budget statement for 2018. I need a motion to go into public hearing. I have a motion by Mr. Gosselin and a second by Mr. Gosselin. I'm going to clear the floor. If you want to discuss that motion to go into public hearing, please press your button again. Mr. Gosselin?
Oh, discussion? Oh, I just want to make one
The
comment.
motion is to go into public hearing. You want to comment on that?
No, I didn't. Yeah, actually, I do want to comment on it,
Okay.
Madam Chair. Just to warn the administration or whoever's coming with expansions, I mean, this is why we have committees. I'm not going to vote for any more expansions. We have committees. Are we strapped for timelines for this? Then, okay. I mean, I'm going to vote because we have to do the budget process, but anything after that, I'm just not going to vote for expansions no more. Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
I heard that before, I'm done.
All right, so we need to vote on going into public session. Roll call. That motion carries. We're now in a public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience who wants to comment on this expansion or the agenda item on the expansion? Hearing none, I need a motion to close public comments. I have a motion by Mr. Trahan, a second by Mr. Brown. Roll call. We're now back in regular session. I need a motion to expand the agenda. I have a motion by Mr. Brown, a second by Mr. Napier. Is there any discussion on the motion to expand? Having none, roll call. Motion carries. Now we're going to the actual motion. It's a resolution that orders and calls a public hearing to be held on November 29th, 2017 for public comments for the proposed consolidated budget statement for 2018. I have a motion by Mr. Brown, a second by Mr. Trahan. Any comments? Mr. Brown. Mr. Gosselin.
Just want to reiterate what a comment that Mr. Gosselin said. I think it's up to the finance chair to make sure that the protocol during budget is established prior to our committee meetings. I think last budget meeting, we had some confusion about amendments and when we should vote on them. I think our finance chair needs to set the protocol ahead of time and let this council know how you'd like this process done so we can all be clear on how we should amend the budget, how we should present it to the administration so we can vote on a deadline.
And just for everybody to remember, budget starts next week. Our first meeting is Monday night. So it's coming up very quick. What time is budget meetings, Kim? 6 o'clock? So that's coming up very quick. So roll call on the resolution. Motion carries. Have a motion by Mr. Garcia, and a second by Mr. Gonsalas to adjourn. We will take a